Hello, friends. In the peaceful Meinong District of Kaohsiung, Taiwan, a young woman named Lin Jia lived a simple life, surrounded by rice paddies, Hakka culture, and handmade paper umbrellas. No one would have guessed that in such a quiet countryside, a love story as beautiful as a fairy tale would begin. Lin Jia, that humble village girl, became, in my eyes, the luckiest woman in Taiwan when she stepped into the heart of a Chinese-American man from New York, successful, wealthy, and kind. But the true miracle wasn't in the riches. It was in the love, real, sincere love. A man who left behind the dazzling world of luxury to follow the gentle gaze of a countryside girl. And that's how their story began. Tony Chang, 44, is a Chinese-American living in bustling New York City. To outsiders, he seems like the perfect image of success, a luxurious home in Manhattan, the owner of a tech company, expensive cars, and even a private helicopter for leisurely flights. But deep down, Tony felt something was missing, someone to build a home with, a true partner in life. He had dated many women, both American and Chinese-American. Some were stunning, others were smart and ambitious. Yet he always felt something was off, too materialistic, too independent, too detached. The Western lifestyle, with its extreme individualism, made it hard for him to find lasting connection. That's when Tony began to seriously consider returning to his roots, to find a traditional wife, a gentle soul who valued family and loyalty. He longed for someone from the countryside down to earth, honest, a woman with a touch of rustic charm, unshaped by the fast pace of city life. So began a journey back to Taiwan. The flight from New York to Taipei took over 15 hours, but to Tony, it felt like watching his life unfold in slow motion. Seated by the window, he stared at the soft layers of clouds, quietly reflecting. He was only 14 when his family moved from Taiwan to the US. He was too young to fully grasp the weight of leaving home, but old enough to feel the loneliness of being in a foreign land. Tony excelled at school, always at the top of his class. He didn't have many friends, but he had a burning desire to succeed and make his parents proud. And succeed he did. He graduated with honors, built his own company from the ground up. Years went by. Tony had everything: wealth, reputation, real estate. Everything but one thing: someone genuine by his side. This time, he wasn't returning to Taiwan for business or vacation. He was searching for something far simpler, real, peaceful love, like the gentle river near his childhood home. Tony arrived in Taipei filled with hope. He met many women. Most of them had moved to the city from the countryside. Some worked in offices, some in spas, others in retail. They were sweet and charming, but after a few dates, Tony would shake his head. They weren't bad, but the city life had changed them, too focused on comparison, calculation, and material dreams rather than emotional depth. One rainy afternoon in a Taipei cafe, Tony sighed to a close friend. Maybe I need to change the way I'm looking for someone. I've met several women in the city, but I just don't connect with anyone. His friend chuckled, then suddenly remembered. You should go to the countryside. I have a niece in Meinong District of Kaohsiung. Very kind girl, still lives with her mom. Not involved in city life at all. She's extremely cautious. Never even had a boyfriend. Tony nodded. He wasn't expecting much, but didn't want to pass up the chance. A week later, he rented a car and drove deep into rural Meinong. A small tin-roofed house stood quietly among the rice paddies. There, he met Lin Jia, a 24-year-old with sun-kissed skin, large, soulful eyes, and a soft, gentle voice. She wasn't flashy like city girls, but something about her was unforgettable. A kind of quiet purity mixed with graceful distance. Tony talked with her, invited her to dinner, and even confessed. I want to get to know you seriously. I'm looking for a wife, Someone like you. Lin Jia smiled faintly and gently shook her head. I'm not used to living far from home, and you don't really know me well enough to talk about marriage. I'm not comfortable with this kind of thing. Her soft yet firm rejection surprised Tony and intrigued him even more. Since that day, Tony didn't give up. He kept coming back to Meinong, not with flashy gifts or grand gestures, but quietly and sincerely. Each time, he'd stop by the local market and bring small gifts for Lin Jia's mother. Sometimes, he'd invite Lin Jia to walk along the river. Other times, they'd just sit by a small bridge, sipping coconut water and chatting about little things. He never brought up marriage again. Instead, he told her stories about life on the other side of the world, old people sitting alone in cold, silent houses, and the unspoken sadness of watching snow fall through a window in the evening. Lin Jia listened, quietly, her eyes deep in thought. One drizzly afternoon, he was finally invited inside for dinner. Madame Ling, Lin Jia's mother, poured tea and smiled warmly. Don't take it personally. Lin Jia's always been this way, slow to open up. The whole village says she's too picky. So many boys have tried, but she always turns them down. She says 3 meals a day, a little land to grow rice, and living with me, that's enough. Even rich suitors have come, but she always says, we don't even know each other. How could we marry? We'd probably divorce in a week. Madame Ling turned to her daughter, half joking. He keeps coming all the way from Taipei. Aren't you touched even a little? Lin Jia blushed and looked out the window in silence. Tony didn't say a word, but he understood. She didn't dislike him. She was afraid of change, of the age gap, of leaving the land where she was born. Afraid of a future she couldn't picture. After dinner, Madame Ling walked Tony to the gate. She's still young, and you're 15 years older. Girls from the countryside don't get exposed to much, so anything unfamiliar scares them. But I don't think she dislikes you. She just needs time. Tony nodded and smiled sadly. He knew that winning a heart wasn't about wealth or showing off. It was about genuine sincerity and patience. After so much patience, Tony decided to try a different approach. One starry night in Meinong, he sat by the wooden fence in front of Lin Jia's house and gently said, "Come visit me in Taipei this weekend. I want to take you to see some beautiful places." Lin Jia hesitated, her gaze avoiding his. "I'm not used to traveling alone. I've never even been to Taipei. If my mom comes, I'll go." Tony chuckled softly and nodded right away. "Then I invite both of you. Think of it as a little getaway, just for fun." 3 days later, a silver-gray car pulled up in front of Lin Jia's home. She and her mother, dressed in simple capeos, carefully packed their hometown gifts, fresh fruit, sticky rice cakes, and some dried fish. When they arrived in Taipei, Tony didn't take them to noisy or overly westernized places. Instead, he chose restaurants with an Indo-Chinese charm. Like the Great River Queen, where soft golden lights glowed and the delicate sound of a guzheng played in a space that was elegant and timeless. It was the first time Lin Jia had ever dined in a restaurant with white tablecloths, tall crystal glasses, and uniformed staff who bowed politely. She looked a little awkward, but her eyes sparkled. Tony didn't say much, he simply watched. He knew he was gently touching a hidden corner of this countryside girl's heart, a corner full of curiosity and quiet emotion. That evening, he took Lin Jia and her mother through Ximending, Dongmen, and Yongkang not just for sightseeing, but to show them a Taipei full of color and contrast. They later visited Daliuqing Pier and the Tamsui River, where city lights shimmered on the water like dreams not yet realized. Standing by the pier, Lin Jia's hair danced softly in the night breeze. She watched the traffic and the glowing city lights without a word, eyes fixed on the distance. Tony stood beside her in silence. Sometimes no hand-holding or sweet words are needed. Warmth can be felt just by being there. That night, back at the hotel, Madame Ling whispered to her daughter, I'm old, I don't need to go anywhere. But I can see. Tony is a good man. He never pushes you, and he's always respectful and kind. Lin Jia didn't respond. She just gave a quiet nod. Inside her, an invisible string began to gently stir. After the trip to Taipei, Lin Jia felt a quiet emptiness she couldn't quite name. What Tony had done for her and her mother wasn't flashy or extravagant, but it touched her deeply, like the first gentle rain on a parched field. She couldn't deny it anymore. She had started to think about this man, a man with extraordinary patience. That afternoon, the sun was mild. Gentle rays lit up the riverside garden behind Lin Jia's house. A small stream curved peacefully nearby, its water clear as glass. The air was quiet, filled only with birdsong and rustling leaves. Tony took Lin Jia for a walk there. She thought it was just another calm visit, like always. But this time, something felt different. He was dressed neatly, holding a small box in his hand, his eyes shining with resolve. Among the wildflowers that had grown naturally along the path, Tony stopped. He turned to face Lin Jia, smiled softly, then suddenly knelt down on one knee. He opened the box. Inside was a delicate diamond ring, not grand because of its price, but because of the hands and heart that offered it. Lin Jia, will you marry me? Lin Jia was stunned. She couldn't react. In her hometown, marriage proposals came through family discussions, a few simple offerings, and words passed through elders, never kneeling, never something so formal. Her heart pounded. She was speechless, tears welling in her eyes. For the first time in her life, she felt truly cherished, like something precious. She didn't say yes, but she didn't say no either. She simply said softly, "Please, give me some time. I'm not used to this." Tony nodded, gently closed the ring box, and stood up. His eyes were still calm and kind, like the breeze on a quiet riverbank at dusk. He was a little disappointed, but in his heart, he understood. After the failed proposal, Tony stayed true to his word. He didn't blame Lin Jia, and he didn't pressure her further. But deep inside, the disappointment slowly grew. He understood love couldn't come from only one side, and time waits for no one. His patience, too, had its limits. He had only a few days left in Taiwan. As the CEO of a tech company, Tony couldn't be away much longer. So many things awaited his attention: shareholders, staff, international partnerships. In those final days, Tony stopped visiting Lin Jia. He didn't call, didn't text. He just quietly packed his bags to return to the US. When friends asked, he simply gave a weary smile. "Well, I guess it's not meant to be. I'll go back to the States and return to my old life. Maybe finding a wife in Taiwan just isn't in the cards for me." The night before his flight, Tony sat alone on the balcony, a glass of wine in hand. The city lights reflected on his quiet face. There was no anger, no bitterness. Only quiet sorrow. A love as beautiful as a drop of dew. Just as he reached out to touch it, it vanished. The next morning, Tony loaded his suitcase into the car. Then his phone rang. "Tony, are you still in Taiwan?" "I've thought it over. I agree. I'll marry you." Tony stood frozen in the courtyard, his suitcase falling to the ground without him noticing. In that moment, he couldn't speak, only inhaled deeply, holding back the rush of emotion rising in his chest. For the first time in his life, he understood what a miracle felt like, a miracle that arrived just as he was about to let go. After that call, Lin Jia changed completely. She called Tony frequently, sent messages, checked in on him. But this time, Tony was the one keeping a bit of distance. Not out of anger, but because he had no choice. He had to return to the US to handle urgent business matters. "I have to go back to the US, Lin Jia," he told her, "to take care of the company. But if you're truly serious, once I've settled everything, I'll come back. I promise." Lin Jia was quiet for a long time before finally asking, hesitantly, "Then, Can I come see you off at the airport? Tony didn't say anything, just smiled softly to himself. It was the first time Lin Jia had ever taken the initiative. A small gesture, but enough to warm his heart in the chill of parting. That day, a light drizzle fell over Taipei. Kaohsiung Airport was packed with travelers. Lin Jia wore a simple white cheongsam, clutching a bouquet of flowers picked from her garden. Her mother walked beside her. Tony arrived, pulling his suitcase. He saw Lin Jia from afar, her eyes full of unspoken emotions. When they came face to face, Lin Jia could no longer hold back. Tears streamed down her cheeks, silent and steady like the rain falling over the countryside river back in Meinong. She rushed to him and embraced him tightly. Tony, I love you so much. I'm just a country girl. I never knew that loving someone meant having to say it out loud. I thought keeping it in my heart was enough. When you didn't call for days, I missed you terribly. I love you. I understand, he whispered, and I will come back. It won't be long. She nodded, tears soaking into his shoulder. They hugged tightly, right there in the middle of the crowd. Lin Jia cried. Tony's heart ached too. He kissed her forehead gently, then slowly pulled away. His voice soft. I have to go now. Goodbye. Wait for me. I'll come back. He turned away, pulling his suitcase through the security gate. He didn't look back. Lin Jia stood there, gripping the bouquet, her lips trembling. She watched him disappear behind the glass wall, her gaze fixed on his silhouette until it was gone. And in that very moment, her entire body went weak. She collapsed onto the airport floor, tears still on her face, lips barely whispering. Tony, don't go. And then she fainted. Madame Ling panicked and cried out. Lin Jia! Lin Jia! People rushed over. Airport staff came running to help. For the first time in her life, Lin Jia understood what it meant to love someone with her entire heart. Not the naive feelings of youth, nor the dreamy fantasies from fairy tales, but real love. Honest, gentle, and aching. A countryside girl who had spent her youth among fields and streams never imagined her heart would one day beat so fiercely for a man from the other side of the world. A stranger, and yet his eyes, his voice, his quiet patience, all slowly melted her guard. Watching his figure fade from view was more than her heart could bear. And the moment Lin Jia collapsed in the airport, that was when she truly knew. She was in love. Tony returned to the U.S. with a heavy heart. New York City was still bustling, the lights still shining brightly through the night, but inside him was a cold, aching emptiness. Endless meetings, emails, company strategies, and partners filled his days. But each night, when he stood alone on the high-rise balcony, looking down at the endless streets, he would remember Lin Jia's eyes and the trembling sound of her voice calling his name that day at the airport. Back in the quiet village of Meinong, Lin Jia had quietly returned to her everyday life after fainting at the airport. The rice fields were still green, the river still drifted gently by her house, but her heart was no longer the same. Across the ocean, Tony opened a small box he had brought from Taiwan. Inside was a bouquet of dried chrysanthemums, carefully pressed between 2 sheets of silk paper. He smiled softly, then typed the first message he had sent in days. I miss you so much, Lin Jia. I love you. He hit send. And somewhere far away, in a peaceful countryside, a phone vibrated gently. Lin Jia looked at the screen, heart pounding. She replied, I love you too, Tony. The day Lin Jia set foot at JFK Airport, the New York autumn air was crisp. Golden leaves fell softly across the wide walkways. She had never flown long distance before. Her eyes were weary from the nearly 20-hour flight. But the moment she saw that familiar man standing among the crowd, all fatigue vanished. Tony, that same gentle gaze, that same warm smile, as if there had never been distance, never a moment apart. Lin Jia dropped her suitcase and ran to him. They embraced tightly in the middle of the strangers. No words were needed. That hug alone made up for all the time apart, all the longing. "I'm here," Lin Jia whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. Tony said nothing, just nodded quietly, eyes glistening. At the parking lot, Tony opened the door of a brand new silver BMW. It gleamed like a mirror, sleek and spotless. The interior was so elegant that Lin Jia hesitated for a moment. "Oh my, is this your car?" Tony smiled softly, didn't answer, and simply opened the door for her like she was a true lady. The car glided smoothly through the wide highways of New York. Lin Jia looked out the window in awe. Long bridges connecting city to city, towering skyscrapers, flashing traffic lights, it all felt like scenes from a movie she'd once seen. "Am I dreaming, Tony?" she asked, wide-eyed. "No, you're living the dream." When they entered the heart of Manhattan, Lin Jia was even more overwhelmed. Glass buildings glowing brightly, giant billboards, bustling crowds, the streetlights stretched on like ribbons of stardust falling to earth. Tony brought her home, a quiet, 3-story villa nestled in an upscale neighborhood on the west side. The house was spacious, with a small garden in the back. Warm golden light shone through the windows. Inside, the decor was elegant, yet full of warmth. Lin Jia stood at the doorway, nervous. "This house is yours, Tony?" Tony nodded. "From now on, if you agree, it's ours." Lin Jia gripped his hand tightly, heart pounding. From a countryside girl in Meinong, she now stood in the heart of Manhattan, not because of wealth, but because love had brought her here. And for the first time, she believed. Some dreams really do come true. During her first week in the US, Lin Jia lived in a dreamlike daze. From the way people ate and slept, to the sounds of honking cars and the chatter of locals on the streets, everything was unfamiliar, and it made her a little nervous. But Tony was always by her side. Gentle, patient, and warm like a soft blanket in the middle of a cold winter. She gradually adjusted to the time difference. No more sleepless nights or waking up at odd hours. Each day, Lin Jia felt as if she were learning to step into a whole new world with a heart full of trust. One weekend morning, Tony smiled and said, "Put on something nice. We're going out." The BMW once again glided smoothly down the highway, but this time it wasn't heading into the city. It was on its way to a private airfield on the outskirts of town. When the gates opened, Lin Jia's eyes widened in surprise. In front of her was a parking area filled with small aircraft, sleek, glistening helicopters. Tony took her by the hand and led her toward a 2-seater helicopter, its engine already warming up. She gasped in shock. "Oh my, is this your helicopter?" Tony chuckled. "Yes, I'm going to fly you over New York City, from the sky." Lin Jia stepped into the cabin with trembling hands as Tony gently fastened her seatbelt. The helicopter lifted slowly off the ground, wind swirling her hair behind the glass dome. In just a few minutes, the entire skyline of New York unfolded beneath them like a massive painting. The towering buildings of Manhattan, the Brooklyn Bridge stretching across the river, and the tiny streams of cars moving below. As the golden afternoon light poured over the city, it shimmered as if coated in gold. Lin Jia brought her hand to her mouth, eyes brimming with tears. "I never even dared to dream of this." Tony took her hand, his eyes full of tenderness, as he looked at her. And in that moment, as the two of them soared through the open sky, Lin Jia softly whispered, "Tony, I love you." Tony didn't say a word. He just looked at her. And in that gaze, he felt the pure, sincere love of a countryside girl from Meinong, who once only knew how to tend rice fields, now flying high above the most dazzling city in the world. That autumn in New York was as radiant as a love song. The leaves turned golden, the breeze was gentle, the sky high and clear. In the small garden behind a villa in Manhattan, where sunlight filtered softly through the leaves, A warm wedding ceremony took place, not grand or extravagant, just close friends, family, and two hearts that had waited far too long to walk through life hand in hand. Lin Jia, the countryside girl who had spent her life surrounded by endless rice fields, who had never stepped beyond the borders of simplicity, now stood in a pure white wedding dress, becoming the wife of a man who once seemed like a dream. A wealthy CEO living in the heart of America's biggest city. But it wasn't wealth that made her happy. It was love, honest and true, that had guided her here, from the quiet riverbanks of Meinong to the open skies of New York. That night, when the party had ended, the guests had gone home, and only the soft glow of candlelight remained in the bedroom, Lin Jia walked over to Tony and held him tightly. She said nothing at first, just embraced him. Silent tears streamed down her cheeks, but not from sadness, from overwhelming joy. She looked into his eyes, the eyes she had once feared losing, and whispered, her voice quiet but full of certainty. Tony, I love you. The gentle light of their wedding night glowed softly on both their smiles. And their story didn't need to go on any longer because all the most beautiful things were already held in that single, perfect moment.